And I think going back to the 90s, there was a lot of redundancy in the time. And it was funny actually at the time, my dad said to me, I don't want you to work in construction. But ironically, both my wife and I have ended up in construction. And actually, I love it. And I know why he gave that advice at the time. But I think the advice at the time was that in many different careers, if you see what I mean. I think the construction industry has changed quite a little bit in terms of diversity and inclusion, and sites work better and things like that. I'm very passionate about sustainability. I started doing sustainability as environmental science when I was at university, and it sort of came up as a choice. Was I going to go down a certain route? Somebody suggested it, and it's the different facets of sustainability that sort of get me out of bed in the morning. Very passionate about social value, leaving a legacy in local communities, but also the benefits of apprenticeships. Around the training that that can bring to young people, but apprenticeship generally for others within organisations to upskill. And then I sort of moved into the energy industry, mainly at the time with what they called a regional electricity company. It was before deregulation, and we used to spend the money around energy efficiency standards of performance. We were working with local authorities to insulate their buildings, basically to deliver carbon savings or energy savings as it was managed at the time. Did that for a few years, went through 2 or 3 consultancies, project management companies, and then had the opportunity to move into construction as a framework manager. They wanted people who were able to work with local authorities, and the business at the time was looking at frameworks and procurement. So I was able to bring those transferable skills into construction. And in about around 2015, moved across within Wilmot's to deliver their head of sustainability, or the head of legacy at the time, which moved into the head of sustainability. And that was very much focused around, in the end, looking at their now or never strategy as well.
It's interesting that you talk about sustainability being something that gets you out of bed in the morning, which is a really, really broad topic, isn't it?
It is. It's a broad church. There's certain subjects within sustainability that I find less interesting and less exciting. But I think, certainly from my point of view, carbon at the moment as a topic, just today, there's been an article that the last 12 months we've been about above 1.5 degrees, and how are we going to get there? So, the only way we are going to achieve this is by addressing the carbon question. And moving towards decarbonising what we do every day, whether that's retrofitting a building, building a new building, travelling to work. There's a wake-up call and a call to arms, I think, basically around the subject.
You mentioned earlier on that sustainability is important to you, and this came through in the degree that you did at university.
Yeah.
What would you say was the spark that ignited this fire within you?
From my past, I think when I was just coming towards the end of my A levels, and at the time everybody went to university, it's a little bit different now, certainly with my kids. But I was looking at things like geography and those sort of humanities, and then it was my mum said to me, somebody suggested you look at environmental science. I went, okay, let's have a look at that. So we didn't have the internet then.
So you got your mum to thank, right?
Well,
the wisdom was in your mum.
Yeah, she said, yeah, she did. So I said, okay, so let's have a look into it. So I reached out to the market, and not the market, reached out and got a bit more information. I thought, well, this actually covers a lot of different subjects, things that were a bit more closer to my heart. And really, once I got into university, I went to Brighton at the time. It was the energy bits that really, I remember sitting in one of my first year's lectures, just by the Watts building it was, and sitting there going, this stuff is interesting. This stuff is, we were talking about how buildings go together, how we can make, improve U values, and how we can make them more efficient, how we can do various different things to heating systems. And I'm thinking it all was clicking in my head. So as I've moved through, I did a dissertation around sort of energy efficiency. It was all around energy profiling, believe it or not, our local scout hut, and the improvements that we could make to that. We went through and came out, and the rest is sort of history from there, to be fair.
And the Scout Hut, what happened to that?
Well, the Scout Hut still stands, and I'm still a Scout leader. So there we are. I'm still involved with Scouting. So yeah, we had probably didn't make many of these improvements at the time, but things like windows have been replaced and roofs have been upgraded in the fullness of times, and boilers have been replaced with more energy efficiency outcomes. But it's still delivering what it should do, which is a great resource to the local community. So fantastic. That. Yeah.
Maybe an invitation to your bosses somewhere of some time, effort and energy to help improve the thermal properties of the Scout Hut. Maybe.
Indeed. It may be a little community project, maybe, a little bit of a social value focus.
How long have you been in Scouts then?
I've been in Scouting. I've never left really. I joined as a cub in the early 80s. And I've gone through every level. It's changed a little bit. It was just lads when I joined. We now have Girl Scouts as well. Yeah. My father is the chairman of the local Scout group. Okay. And my kids are young leaders, and my daughter is an Explorer Scout, and my son and daughter have been all through Scouting as well. So I think Scouting provides kids with the ability to get out and enjoy themselves, do stuff that maybe they can't do at school because of various, they're reluctant to run those sort of activities. Some of the things that I've got out of it personally, out of, things I've learned, you meet different people, you run an evening, things don't quite go to plan. So you have to think on your feet. It all helps you in your working life. Plus you can bring stuff from work that you've learned and you can teach the kids or things along those lines. So there's lots of opportunity. Whether we're out, going camping, and we still light fires, we still do all that. Every child likes to light a fire. I've never known a kid not like to light a fire. Marshmallows over the fire, all that sort of thing. Camping under canvas, we do it all. But at the end of the day, it's about providing that experience that they may not get elsewhere, and providing them with access to the outside and at the end of the day, life skills
and appreciation, I'd imagine, for nature as well and how things all go together.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the sort of the badges that you do, you still get your what we call activity badges. A lot of them are focused around ecology and nature. They don't actually use those words; they're softer. But yeah, there's staged badges around appreciating that and going out. So yeah, it delivers, and I think it goes back to the Halian days of when they did the first camp on Brownsea Island. That was all about appreciating nature and getting out there and accessing things that kids didn't normally have access to.
And so you mentioned about your children being involved within Scouts. Was that a conscious thing from yourself and your wife?
Yeah, I think so. They started as beavers. Actually, my daughter started with the Girl Guides as a rainbow, and then came into its cubs mainly because my mother was involved with guiding. But they came into cubs, and my nephews as well came through as well. And
it's a family affair.
Yeah, I suppose from a personal point of view, it was about not wanting them to leave. The organisation struggles with recruitment of young leaders, and I'm not as young as I used to be, and I have to bring young people through to bring young others. And my daughter relates to the girls that are in the group. So, they look up to her in terms of providing her with guidance and support and things like that. So, it's all about providing them. And also, I think young people, it's important for them to do a bit of volunteering once in a while. My son has got a mate who he went to school with, and they now run the games together and things along those lines, whereas my daughter does other bits and pieces as well. So I think it's important that they come along on a Thursday night and help out, and they're gradually getting more and more involved and running things. And for them, it's organisation skills as well. So it does them good.
Love that. So it sounds like your parents have been involved in Scouts, and I can see a link between nature and the way that society works and the environment. You mentioned about geography and so on and so on. I'm just wondering who was inspirational or a key figure in your life that you think has helped you to get where you are today.
That's an interesting one. That is, I suppose, from a high level, big name person. I think not necessarily inspiring me, but I like what he has to say. But I think he inspires a lot of people around what he says, and I think he has the ability to kind of, he's Sir David Attenborough. At the end of the day, you can't deny what he has to say and what he presents on the television, making our natural world what it is and what we have to do to protect it. I think that he's a great orator in what he does. In a professional point of view, particularly in recent years when I was working at Wilmot Dixon, somebody who I've, again, personally worked with on various bits and pieces in terms of conferences, but also asked to speak at events, was Jonathan Porritt. Founder of Formula Future. He was a non-executive director of Wilmot Dixon, but somebody who would give his time to come and support your initiatives within the business, understand whether you were presenting to, the apprentices and the trainees about their future in the business, but also heard him speak and convince some of the most cynics in the business around why they need to take action on climate change. And moving it forward. And his book, Hope in Hell, is a really good read in terms of putting that one forward. So certainly in recent years, those would be those sort of individuals that have sort of pushed it forward, if you see what I mean.
It's interesting that you mention those two people, because I think when I look at them, at least, they're quite unassuming individuals. They're not loud and in your face.
Yep.
They're not full of fanfare and bells and whistles. But yet the influence that they have is very pointed, and I think it can be very broad also.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting that those two have had a profound effect.
Yeah.
Not just on you, but I'm talking many people.
I think when I've heard certainly Jonathan speaking many times in many forums, talking to some very senior people and being able to pitch a message of what they need to do around climate change and what the influence they can have, and then coming to a graduation of apprentices and trainees with their parents there as well, and pitching the same message with the same communication, but at the level so that they can understand that they're actually picking the mentor up and where they need to place their shirt for a better day, if you see what I mean. So it is very, very, very inspirational.
And so if you're thinking about the people that you inspire, what would that look like for you?
For me, inspiring young people and providing them with opportunity, an understanding of my knowledge. So I suppose in previous times, I've had the privilege of being able to manage the trainee program, for example, at Wilmot Dixon. Took great pride in providing support, whether that's through mentoring, providing advice on careers and things along those lines. Going through the selection process, coming up with the formula that we would use to bring those young people in, and also providing them the forum also to communicate their messages to the senior leaders as well. I can stand there and talk to the senior leaders of a business, but actually a message can be delivered sometimes a lot harder and a lot clearer if it's a young person who's maybe worried about doing it, but actually I think sometimes those senior leaders listen harder and clearer when it's somebody along those lines. So I think for me, inspiration for young people is where it is. After all, they're the ones that they're going to be the ones that pick up the mantle from when I leave the industry or move on to do something else. And I want them to be in a good place and with the tools and the skills that they need to move their careers forward. And I get so much pleasure out of watching, the trainees that I've supported in the past getting promoted, whether you popped up on LinkedIn. Some I may not even be in touch with anymore. But it's really interesting to think you just might have been a little bit of inspiration in their life. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Love that. Good. So thinking about now the time that you spent at university, throughout your journey to get to where you are, what would you say the kind of 2 or 3 key principles or foundational elements that are needed or that you found useful in your life to get to where you are?
I think it's making sure you've got a stable background to approach. I'm very fortunate that when I went to university, I sort of lived at home, but I always had a part-time job, and it was mainly around the fact at the time that my father was out of work because he was made redundant. Sorry about that. I didn't expect that. So I decided to live at home at the time. So and I would commute over to Brighton every day. And I think if you've got that stable support from the people around you, it really helps you to focus your studies in terms of what you need to achieve and along those lines. So I think that's one of the main things. It's also having a subject that you're passionate and you want to understand as well. I think at the time environmental science was a little bit up and coming. We're talking the early 90s, and you could potentially see where it was going to go. I don't think back then we could have anticipated where we are now, if you see what I mean. But the thing round it was that there was some real good subjects, particularly around sort of energy and the carbon side. Even it wasn't sort of carbon then, it was sort of energy efficiency and saving energy and bits along that. But it was stuff, it was subjects that got me out of bed and I really, so I think the critical thing is a nice stable background around studying and having a nice subject that you can understand and move forward with.
Seems like you've got a good relationship with your dad.
Yeah. Well, it's quite bizarre, really, because I worked with him at Wilmot Dixon as well. So he was there 10 years. I joined in 2007, and I also had the pleasure of working with my wife at Wilmot Dixon as well. So three of us all worked at Wilmot's at the time. So
there's the theme running around. the families involved in the Scouts, the families involved in Wilmot Dixon.
Yes, yeah. You never know. Stranger things have happened. Yeah.
So just picked up on a bit of emotion there, and I think it's a surprise emotion with reference to your dad becoming unemployed and being made redundant, and you deciding intentionally to be at home. Talk to me around that.
I think at the time it was the early 90s. I think it was money. It was it was a case of being able to afford to go to university, I think, and I felt what I could do was I had a part-time job. I was working for Sainsbury's, and I thought, well, I can still do that. I can buy a car, I could commute. I knew somebody was already going to be commuting to Brighton, and it just sort of came together and worked. Brighton was doing a course that ticked all the boxes, if you see what I mean. And actually, in the end, it worked out all right. My dad was out of work for 6 months. He then went off to work for Kia, if I remember right.
Okay. There we go. I knew it was
Jones, I think he was at the time. So that was where it was. And I think going back to the 90s, there was a lot of redundancy in the time. And it was funny actually at the time. My dad said to me, "I don't want you to work in construction," but ironically, both my wife and I have ended up in construction. And actually, I love it. And I know why he gave that advice at the time. But I think the advice at the time was that in many different careers, if you see what I mean. I think the construction industry has changed quite a little bit in terms of diversity and inclusion, and sites work better and things like that. So I have a great relationship with my dad. We're into our normal subjects of cars and things along those lines. So and he's always likes to know what's going on at the old places in terms of work. He keeps an interest in it.
He's retired now.
He is indeed. Yes. Yeah.
It's great that you see as well that has directly impacted in where you are today.
Indeed.
There's lots of people that I've spoken to, not just on this podcast, but they attribute the position and perspective that they have, the resilience that they have back to those early childhood moments where they've had a foundation that they've been able to build upon.
Yes. Without a doubt. I certainly, and I think my brother would say the same, is we're not where we are without the loving background that my parents gave us. End of, really. It's food.
So how does that feature in for you then as a parent? You've got a few children, a couple of children?
I've got 2 children. I've got one of each. I'm very fortunate. I've got my son's the eldest. He's 19. And as ever, I've pushed him in the direction that he wants to. He's doing an apprenticeship. My daughter's at college. And she's doing her A-levels, and she's also thinking, once I've done my A-levels, don't want to go to university, want to go down the apprentice route. She can see her brother working and earning money.
Okay.
So
I was going to say, does she just see him earning the money?
Yeah, earning the money. But I think what he can see is earning and learning at the same time.
Yeah.
And the value that it brings him coming back and explaining some of the customer experiences he's had, some of the challenges that he's had to sort out. The fact that the big bosses turn up and want to be given a look round when he's in the middle of things. Stuff has to be brought in and it has to be ordered in, and it takes a bit of a challenge for him to, he comes home and says, well, this has happened today, that's happened today. And then he has to go off and do a bit of studying when he goes off to the learning centre, for example. So he's really pushing forward with that apprenticeship, and it's great to see him buzzing. So yeah, it's useful.
And then, so how does that show up then with the experience that you've had and the way that you've been brought up, with the idea that yourself and your wife are going to be bringing up and raising your children? Although I appreciate that a 19-year-old doesn't need the same type of attention that maybe a 5-year-old does, but I'm just wondering how that shows up for you.
I think when you've got children that are in their late teens, you have to give them an element of freedom. You're paranoid about when they're going out. My daughter's learning to drive at the moment. I remember that when my son was learning to drive as well, and then the first time they take their car out, and just the other day he had to drive to Milton Keynes to the learning centre, and it's sort of okay. And I suppose from us, it's giving sufficient space to grow, but not far enough to continue to nurture. I suppose in the end, like any parent, you've got to let the child go, if you see what I mean. But they haven't got any plans at the moment to move out. So not too bad, if I'm honest.
And you got no plans to kick them out?
No. I think that the kicking out probably happened before they decide to move out.
That's fun. So would you have any thoughts or advice for someone that is maybe struggling or feeling like they're struggling to be a parent of teenagers and trying to support and help and navigate as the teenager tries to find their place in the world? Because being a teenager now is very different than it was in the 90s.
Yeah. Advice for parenting. Parents don't get a manual. It's not like buying a car. I think you have to listen to your teenagers. You have to appreciate what gets them out of bed when they do finally get out of bed in the morning. What their interests in. Try to understand their friend groups as best you can. From our point of view, is trying to make your home as welcoming to those friend groups as you can. And try to provide them with sound advice on what they might want to discuss. They might bring some harebrained ideas in, but actually sometimes if you unpick those ideas, some of those ideas are good ideas. So I think as a parent of teenagers, you have to let them try to flourish, and on the ideas when they can flourish, and then watch them succeed. It's a bit like our daughter with her A levels. She's got some tough subjects that she's doing, but she will come home and she will tell us the ins and the outs of the English law system in terms of what she's learned that day. But that's her way of expressing what she's learned and telling us about how it is and doing her learning process. So as a parent, you've got to, as much as you don't want to listen to that at 8 o'clock at night, and you've got to do the shopping online for whatever reason, actually you have to give that time, because actually as time goes by, when they've left home in 10 years time, you'll probably pine for that experience, if I'm honest. So that's, some days are good days, other days are bad days.
Proudest dad moment?
There you are. Proud for my daughter, probably the day she arrived, because it was a bit harrowing, is probably what I would say.
Traumatic birth?
Very, very traumatic, and it could have turned out a different way. For my son, probably the fact he's got an apprenticeship at Audi, because I'm an absolute Audi fan. So, yeah, that's probably it.
Fantastic. Love it. I love that. It's great. What about proudest work moment or career moment for you?
Oh, proudest work moment. I'd have to think about that.
We've got time. That's fine. We've got time.
Trying to think about proudest work moment. There's so many. That's the trouble. It's sort of
just pick one, or you can list a few.
There's so many different moments that you can have, and I think it's when you achieve great things. And I think from my point of view, it has to be when we're at Wilmot Dixon. And one of the proudest times was we used to do something called a challenge, and we would raise money of an annual basis for a local charity. The one in question being Chestnut Tree House in Worthing. Anyone in Sussex will know that charity. And
what does that charity do?
It's a children's hospice.
Okay. End of life?
Yeah, all the way through really of children that are disabled, providing respite care.
Okay.
But yeah, all the way through to end of life. And I think one of the proudest moments was when we'd raised best part of £900,000 over a number of years, and they recognised us for it. With a certificate and that sort of thing. But it was such a collaborative experience of the entire team in terms of all the different things that we'd done. We'd walked up Snowdon and we'd walked along the Jurassic Coast, but other people had done other things, like the good old cake sale and this and that. But at the end of the day, everyone had sort of played their part. So everyone was able to say, I've contributed to that £900,000 worth of money. So we were hoping to get to the million, but unfortunately things changed. We didn't get there. But very, very proud moment to raise that sort of money.
That's fantastic. And it's interesting as well that you're saying that the proudest moment for you wasn't actually the thing that you were paid to do, right?
Yeah, no, going to work's great, but I think sometimes when you've got a great team around you, some of those things that spin out of working with others and people being on the same journey with you as well makes the proudest moments, because it's a product of a good team, in terms of delivering those outcomes for me.
I think also some people can get really hung up on the whole capitalist view of things, but it's just a great example of how a profit-making organization can not just make a difference in the community, as in hospice, but also have a clear impact in your life as well.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think the what was great with the relationship we had with that charity was it wasn't just about raising hard cash. We would go down as teams and we would do gardening and also pulling on our resources to do other things, where it might be putting up a new fence or a few new bollards needed replacing or something along those lines. And if you can make it, just some of these organisations, not just necessarily this hospice but others, just struggle to get stuff done. But if we can just say, well, can somebody help us out with this? And they go, yeah, we can do that. It just makes that people going through those through hospices and things like that. They want it to look nice and they want to have a good experience, and we can help them do that and make the environment so much more friendly. It always feels much better when the bollards aren't falling down and it's all looking well tended. But sometimes these organisations can't afford, they don't have the volunteers, but we can get down there and help them out. And it's great to when people come in, they've got a great smile on their faces, but they're going through maybe quite a hard time moving forward. So
fantastic. You mentioned about this concept of time, and there are kind of two arguments or 2 points of view. One of them will say, we need more time because we're learning and we need to make sure that things are done right. The other one will say, we've not got enough time. We need to run or do things as fast as possible. What would you say is one of the things that would really benefit the industry to try and help us get more output for the time that we've got?
I suppose I'm a little bit probably biased. I think in terms of the answer to this question, I think we should be monitoring what we're doing more and getting a greater understanding of our projects quicker, so that we can then make the decisions around how we reduce the carbon. Even if at the moment, everybody can talk about cost of a project and cost per this and cost per that, but actually, what's the carbon by this and the carbon by that? Every project in my book, we should be at least counting how much carbon in it. Not, even if we don't try to reduce it, let's at least understand what's in that project, if you see what I mean. And then perhaps the next stage is we move on to saying, how do we reduce it? Because how can we make improvements if we don't know what the current situation is? And that's probably one of my frustrations at the moment is where are we now?
Right. I think that's a good question. I think that leads us really well into the demolition zone.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Are you ready to do it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. And welcome back. We are now in the demolition zone. Yeah. So you have constructed kind of 3 items. For those people that are listening, we've got what appears to be a fairly low-level building closer towards you, Richard, and then there's an arch type of shape with 2 kind of things on the side holding what looks to be a cylinder in the middle, and then at the front of that, it looks like I don't know. You describe it. What does this? Well, what does this all mean?
So this for me is construction on a site and representing waste management and the myth that I wanted to present today to you. The shape at the back is the good old famous skip. Okay. And the others is the separation that we quite often have across along our projects. And, depending how much space you have will depend how much separation you have, whether it's, plasterboard, metal, wood, and so on and so forth. And the myth I wanted to sort of destroy today is the fact that it's all right, don't worry, I can recycle it. And what I want to focus the mind around here is about resource efficiency and not buying too much. And actually, do we need to change stuff, and do we need to buy that amount of stuff, or can we reuse other bits and pieces? And making sure we've got resources controlled on projects so that it's not going in the skip, and we're managing our wastage. Because it's quite frustrating when you say, well, how are we managing waste? They say, well, it doesn't matter. If we put it, we're going to send it for recycling. And that's the complete wrong way we should be looking at things. It should be, no, we've bought enough plasterboard on our site, and we've got enough wastage in it, but not sort of 20% wastage or things along those lines. So the myth today is, no, it's not all right to recycle, because we should be thinking about resource efficiency at the start.
I love that. So before you think recycle, don't even buy it. Then you don't need to recycle.
I love it. Yes.
And then definitely. If you need to recycle, well, that's your stopgap. That's not the first place to go.
It is indeed. And I think that's where we have to get our mindset at this moment in time. And it relates back to a lot of our conversations today around carbon is, if we're manufacturing something, then recycling it and then using it, it's all that extra carbon emissions that are going into it. And it's the inefficiencies that you happen as well, because if you're putting stuff in a skip, 9 times out of 10, it's already had a bit of a transportation and journey around a project. So people are paying for that to happen, and then to put it in the skip and send it on is a significant waste of time, money, and carbon. So, yep, that's my myth today.
Good. Well, feels like you've cleared that up. I think the only thing left to do now is to bust it up.
Excellent. I will do.
There you go. With one sweep of the hand, everything flies.
Indeed.
I love
Thank
that.
You.
Good. Well, I appreciate your insights. I appreciate your personal story and how that shows up for you. And I'm sure that there's going to be a number of people listening that will be inspired or affected by that in a positive way.
Well, thank you, Darren, for the invite to come and speak today. It's been an insight for myself as well. Really enjoyed it. And maybe we'll do it again soon.
Definitely. But before you go, just got one last question for you. So the question that I have is what one piece of advice would you give to enable us to get to a better place than what we are at the moment? Now, that better place may be within an organization, that better place may be within an industry, may even be within a family. But what one piece of advice would you give that would enable us to get to a better place than where we are at the moment?
Oh, so I'm going to have to think about that one. What other things are people giving you?
I've never asked that question to anyone else, Richard. Yeah.
Oh God, that's really difficult. I think for me, in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis, it's the advice I would probably give is, do you need to do that now? In simple terms of the climate emergency, we've got a lot of people and projects saying things have to happen, but actually, how best do we deliver that by not knocking it down and moving it along in those directions.
So are you saying that the piece of advice that you would give is to prioritize, to make sure that the things that you're doing, as in asking that question, does it need to be done now? Is the timing right? Is the priority right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you've probably nailed what I'm trying to say. It's about, we have I suppose we have a society sometimes which is very now. I've got to have it now. I've got, it's very instant. And I think, there's almost goes back to my grandparents, the old mend and make do sort of situation, quite often in terms of, when my grandparents were alive, they would repair stuff and, very rarely went and bought anything new because they were brought up at a time when rationing was around, and stuff just wasn't available, I remember my grandmother, when the internet arrived, she could not believe that you could order stuff and it'll arrive just like that. But bless her, that was where we came. So yeah, I think we have to maybe take our foot a little bit off the pedal and say to ourselves, let's look after the planet a bit more.
Love that. Fantastic bit of advice. I love it. Thanks again.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for the invite. I've enjoyed it.
Good.
Yeah, it was good. I watched the other two and I went, no, I did. I watched the other two and I went, oh yeah, right, I got on the groove now. That camera going backwards and forwards is a bit freaky, but...
I'd like you to do me a favor, and I don't mean here just to ask you to subscribe and to follow, but what I'd really like you to do is to share this podcast with as many people as you think would benefit from it. I would love to maintain the quality of people that are joining me on this podcast, and so in order for me to do that, I really need your help. It could be somebody that's looking to get into an industry, but they're not quite sure what industry they want to get into. Maybe it's a teenager that is just finishing their GCSEs or starting A-levels. Maybe it's somebody that's doing an English degree at university, but is not quite sure what they want to do with that degree. So I invite you just to share this podcast with as many people that you know so that we can grow this community, so that we can maintain the quality, engaging conversations that we're having together. Thank you for your help.